Thank you for joining, everybody. Today we'll be talking about the Sea of Galilee, and we will be learning about where is this sea as mentioned in the scriptures. Is it in the Middle East? Is it in Africa? Is it in Europe? Is it in Asia? Wherever it is. Let's try and figure this out. Okay, so first of all, I just logged into my online Blue Letter Bible, and I typed in the word Sea of Galilee. And I got these 7 scriptures that match exactly that phrase, Sea of Galilee. Now, I want you to pay attention to the 5 issues or items that I have highlighted in these 5 scriptures, or these 7 scriptures, and see what the Spirit of the Most High shows you as we go through this discussion. So the first one talks about Isaiah was walking by the Sea of Galilee, so two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea. So the first point there is that it was the sea, okay? The word sea. I'm not going to read all of them. The second point is a mountain. In this second scripture, there's mention of a Sea of Galilee, and then Isaiah went up a mountain. The third one is like the first one, a sea. It doesn't say a river, it doesn't say a lake, it doesn't say that. It says a sea. So sea, mountain. Third point is 2 things. Coasts. Coast of Tyre and Sidon and coast of Decapolis. Somebody was talking about Decapolis this week. All right. The fourth point is this scripture here, which calls it the Sea of Tiberias. And it says the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Note, Sea of Tiberias also is a sea, but that's the fourth point. The fifth point, something else that was being discussed this week, interestingly. We have the mention of the land of Zebulun and Naphtali. And we have the mention of the Galilee of the nations. The Galilee of the nations. So pay attention to those 2 items, Zebulun, Naphtali, Galilee of the nations. This last scripture repeats the same thing about Galilee of the Gentiles, which is referring to the nations. Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into this. So when you look at the word sea in the concordance, in the Strong's Concordance in the Blue Letter Bible, it's pronounced as thalassa. It's from this root word, which we'll get into briefly after this. And that is the Strong's number. And it's used in the King James Version as sea 92 times. And it refers to the sea. Now, you all know by now, I use the description here, and I use the rest of the information down here for clues, but not necessarily for guidance on the meaning. On the meaning, of the word, but for clues, because sometimes they'll put information here to like mislead you. Like here it says Mediterranean Sea or the Red Sea, but don't shy away from looking there. You can find some clues to the truth. And then the definition is as a sea, especially the sea. So it's not talking about a lake. It should be pretty clear from this. Let's see what the root word says. So the root word, which is this number 2 here, is actually pronounced as halse. It's the primary word, so there's no other root word below that. And the outline of it is that it's used to refer to salt, right? Strong's definition is salt. So what connection do you make between the sea and the salt? I used to live by the coast in Kenya. I used to go swimming in the Indian Ocean, and I can tell you it's a very salty water. I don't know about you and what your experience has been with the sea, but I'd like to hear if it has anything to do with salt. Okay, moving on. Let's look at the word Galilee. It's pronounced as Galilea. comes from that Strong's word. That's the root word. And it's used 63 times to refer to a place or something called Galilee. And it means circuit, circuit, okay? And here the definition is explaining Galilee of Hebrew origin, Galilea or Galilea, the heathen circle, heathen circle. We'll look at that word heathen shortly. Again, there's some information here. It's up to you if you want to use it. Name of a region in northern Palestine. I read it. I didn't find much of help in there. But anyway, so when we look into this root word, we get, that's the one presented here, 1551. It's pronounced as Galil or Galil, and it also has another root word, and it says the meaning is circuit or a district, referring to a district. But you see the circuit word is still being referenced again. Now, interestingly, in the information in here, it talks about a territory in Naphtali, largely occupied by heathen. Heathen. Remember those words we talked about. And we've just seen here the definition includes the heathen circle. So we're getting more and more clues as we observe the information before we draw any conclusions. Okay, let's look at the word heathen. In the scriptures, the word heathen is pronounced goye or goe, and that is the root word, and that's the number for Strong's. Refers to nation, heathen, Gentiles, people. And here in the meanings, you see nation, people, and here it explains usually of non-Hebrew people. I highlighted that because that is the meaning I am seeing of the word heathen used most of the times. You can see here its nation is meaning is 374 times. So it's a nation of people. But the heathen word 143 times. So that's the explanation. Now, when you go into the root word, it's going to go into something that describes like the body or the back, and that's how it's used. Give me just a second here. Right, sorry about that. Now, let's look at this word here. And I'm introducing this word because it means, this is the word kafres, or it's also written or pronounced as calves. And this is a description from Wikipedia. I happen to know this because in my country, some of you may have encountered this if you've interacted with Arabic-speaking people or people who are in Islam. But this word kafres or calves, the name kafres is derived from an Arabic word for infidels or kafir. Infidels refers to a person who disbelieves the God of Islam. In Swahili, we call it kafir, and it's used to refer to an unbeliever, okay? It is the same word as heathen, because the heathens referred to the rest of the nations that were different in the sense that they did not believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So this, I guess I just knew this information from my upbringing. Some people may know it as well, but the word kafir or kafres is the same word as heathen. Now, this will be very important because whenever we're going to see this word, you need to know that it's referring to a heathen people. Okay, now let's get right into it. So after digging around and being shown a lot of things, some of these things we were shown as early as, I believe, February, when we came back from South Africa. We started digging and poking around, our brother Nick and I, and we came across this map here. This is a map from Herman Moll, is the publisher or the cartographer, and it's done in 1701. 1701. Yes. Let's zoom in on this map and look at it a little bit more. Now, of course, you can see the obvious thing here. The Sea of the Caffres, heathen. The Sea of the heathen. The coast of the Caffres. The coast of the heathen. Okay. And this is a map, I believe, yes, from, like we saw in the previous slide, 1701. So in 1701, the people that were drawing this map identified a people that they call the Caffres or the heathens, and they occupied this part here. This is stretching from Namibia, possibly even, yeah, at least Namibia, all the way to like Mozambique. This is South Africa, Mozambique, and so on. And this part of the waters is called as the Sea of the Caffres. Let's look at some more information. Here's another map. This is from 1669. This is slightly earlier, about, 70 or so years earlier, I guess. Yep. Okay, 1669 by Richard Bloom. And we're going to look at it a bit more in depth. Now, pay attention to this same map. I'm going to zoom in the next few slides, and you will see it has some demarcations as well. Different cartographer, okay? So here in purple, it says Libya. I'm just using this to give you orientation that when you read some words in the scriptures, don't think of the current day Libya. It also says here Ethiopia. So we're talking about this whole Central Africa region down to the southern part is being called Ethiopia. You can even see here it says meridional or the Ethiopian Ocean. All right. And we can see here in green, it says Sea of Congo. All right. We can also see here, it says Ocean Oriental or the Indian Sea. Okay. We're beginning to see a little bit more. Now, let's zoom in a little bit farther into this map. Now, here it gets interesting. This in purple was highlighting coast. If you read it vertically going downwards, coast of Caffres, coast of heathens, similar to the other map of 1701. But this was before, this was in 1669, 50 or so years, or 40 years almost before. They also have Sea of Caffres, Sea of heathens. What's going on here? Two people between 1669 and 1701, and there were a few more maps. I just figured I wouldn't have the time to talk about all of them, but there were more even recent maps from the 1800s that marked several territories in here as Caffrea, or the same word, Caffres, and it was British Caffres, and so on and so forth. We can look at those during the discussion. Now, oftentimes when you tell people that, some of these locations may have been in Southern Africa, people will say, well, but is there any evidence of Romans in Southern Africa? Because we know the Romans, the Empire of Rome, Roman Empire was ruling a lot of the world during the time of Isaiah. They crucified him. So here's a map that shows a place down there in South Africa called Constantine. Now, why would you call this place Constantine? And it's an old map. I'll figure out what the age is and probably add it the notes, but it's an old map. It's not from the 1900s. It's from before the 1800s or the 1800s. So there's a place called Constantine. Constantine is a Roman name. Not only that, but We also have coins with the name of Hadrianus, and this was a Roman ruler. And the backside of the coin has a lady who is resting on something, and she is petting a lion. So this is depicting Africa, where lions are. Now, here's a bit more information about this coin. First of all, we've seen the coin back and front. Now, the translation of the inscription is that Hadrian, emperor, consul for the third time, father of the nation. Okay, father of the nation. Now, I know that was not a father of an African nation. Okay, then the reverse here, it says, of course, Africa. And the lady there is wearing an elephant scalp, and she is naked to the waist, and she is reclining left, placing her hand on the lion and leaning on a basket there. So who is this guy, Hadrian? Okay, first of all, who issued this currency? This currency was issued by Rome. The Roman Empire between 27 and 395 AD issued this currency. Okay, it's 1 aureus or something like that, which equals 25 denarii or denarius. Okay, and this guy is obviously a Roman. So I'm introducing this to show that the Romans were present in Africa. I'm not saying that the coins were found in South Africa, but I'm saying that this is evidence of Roman activity at the time of Christ, 27 BC to 395 AD, in Africa, Roman activity in Africa. Okay, let's go a bit deeper now and look at some of the locations in South Africa that I think are part of the Sea of Galilee. So this is the southern tip of South Africa on the western side. And this is Cape Town, major city over there. You have Robben Island, where Mandela was in prison for 27 years. We need to do a study on that one. Might find that it's Patmos Island. I don't know. But I just put for you 3 numbers here. First is Table Mountain. Remember we talked about mountains? The second one here, I haven't labeled it, but there are other mountains here that I will show you briefly. But there's also, in those other mountains, there's a place called the Mountains of the 12 Apostles. The Mountains of the 12 Apostles, and there are actually 12 of them. Mountains, okay? Then here, we have a circle or semicircle, circular bay that is called False Bay. So we'll look at all of this and see what they inform us about this region. Now, remember we just saw that this coast and going up on the Atlantic side, as well as going up on the Indian Ocean side for some distance, was called the Sea of the Heathens. I am saying I believe that is the Sea of Galilee, and it includes this False Bay. Okay, so this is number 1, the Table Mountain. This is the view from the mountain. So looking towards Robben Island, which is that piece up there. I'll just play the video, let you listen in. I don't think you can hear what they're saying, what we're saying, but what you saw here on the left is called Lion's Head. It's one of the mountains there. And this stretches this way to where we are, which is a Table Mountain itself. Down here is Cape Town. That's the city that you're seeing in front of you. And this is on this Atlantic side. This is not the bay down there. But you can see This is the Atlantic Ocean on this left side of this map up here. That's Cape Town City. And there's a bunch of mountains around, but this is Table Mountain and mountains next to it. So those are mountains next to Table Mountain or the Table Mountain Range. It's quite windy. Might see those people there shaking. It got quite windy. Okay, so that was that Table Mountain, number one. Now, this is this second point where you have the mountain of the 12, the mountain of the 12 apostles or disciples. That's what it's called by the locals and by the nation of South Africa. And those mountains are the ones that you see in the background here. It's myself and Brother Nick, and Sister Specie was kind enough to do the photography. So this is a mountain range where number 2 is, and it's called the Mountain of the 12 Apostles. Wonder why? Let's listen to this video. I think this one might be a bit more audible. So we are in Cape Town, South Africa. That is Lion's Head on the other side of Table Mountain. And behind it here, just protruding slightly, is behind this tree is what they call the 12 apostles. So if you start counting distinct mountains that are right now covered by the clouds there, you will count 12 of them. Each of these sloping mountains are distinct. It's a bit cloudy at the top. They're distinct, but when you get all the way here, so they start from this end, going all that way until that slope in the middle, separated by Lion's Head. That is in Cape Town, the 12 apostles, mountains of the 12 apostles. All right, I apologize for the audio there, not so good, but I was just showing you the mountain range where you have the 12 distinct mountains, and they call it the Mountain of the 12 Apostles. That is in number 2 area over here. And the water here on the Atlantic is very rough. And I'm mentioning that because there's a story in the scriptures that talks about Isaiah and his disciples, and they got on the Sea of Galilee. And I'm saying the Sea of Galilee includes this side that we call today the Atlantic, and it's very rough. And in that story, there was a storm, and they thought they were going to perish, but the Most High, Isaiah, calmed the storm. This is what you've seen in the waters here in the video. Okay, let's look at the next slide. Sorry, excuse me. I need to go to the next one, which is this. Okay, so in the previous video, I was showing you this Lion's Head mountain, but from that side on the right, or on the west, on the east. Here is when we were driving down towards it. Just a view for you to see what the area, the surrounding area looks like. White people.
Right. And most of these houses are empty because it's not the people's first houses, you know. You understand?
Yeah, it's like vacation homes and
stuff like that. I think I want to make a turn somewhere here. So I wanted you to see that, and especially because you have all these mountains around, not just this Lion's Head, but you saw another mountain to the left there. And there were many of them. You can look it up on Google. In this area, there's many actual mountains, not hills, mountains. And I want to say this, in the scriptures, we read about Isaiah telling the disciples, I'll meet you on the other side. And he goes up a mountain, or he goes up into a mountain to pray. And he did that many times. So wherever the Sea of Galilee is, it has to have some mountains or a mountain around it.
Mhm.
Okay, let me go to False Bay, number 3 here. And so this is an image of a sign that is relative to that where it says you're here. And this is False Bay. And I took this picture of this sign. Interestingly, the map in here is from the 1860s. So it's an old map, very accurate. The big 1000 here is the area of the water. That's 1,000 square kilometers. For those of you in the rest of the world outside of America, you're very comfortable with those numbers. You can do the math on Google, but this whole area, the bay, what is called False Bay, is approximately 1,000 square kilometers, as the sign says. From Cape Point, which is the southern westmost part of Africa, southwestmost part of Africa, Cape Point, down here, where I'm pointing with my cursor, to this other side is 35 kilometers. So it's a really big area, really big area. Now, you can read all this later on at your own time, but I'll just point this out, that the wind from the Indian Ocean side comes from this side, and the other wind from the Atlantic comes from this side. And when they enter this bay, it goes in a circular motion around the bay, going from the left around this way to the right, and the wind comes out like this and out in a circular circuit manner. I think you had the word circuit before in the description of the word Galilee. And the water too is pushed out that way. That's what is being described here. That makes the place very, very fertile, because it brings a lot of nutrients with the water and deposits them around this whole bay, and there's a lot of wildlife around here. That is the circuit. Okay, let me move on to the next slide. Again, still on this bay, we were staying somewhere around here where I'm pointing with the mouse. It's called Simonstown. And so we would drive not around the whole thing, but just like a little bit this way, and sometimes go up to Cape Town. So here I have a little video just to give you a viewpoint of what it looks like from Simonstown, which is somewhere around in here, going up for a few miles. We are on the main road, or M4, in Simonstown, Cape Town, or south of Cape Town, South Africa. And we've just gone from seeing Cape of Good Point and Cape of Good Hope and False Bay and some penguins.
They are not called penguins of Madagascar. It should be called the penguins of North.
And this is Bay, or that's what they call a taxi. It just,
AKA Matatu.
yeah, can you call it a matatu? Notice the mountains again. And yes, that was False Bay to the right, or what is the circuit part of the Sea of Galilee, which Galilee means, like we saw, Galilee meant circuit or circular. Now, let me talk about the word heathen before we wrap up here. You see, this is the southernmost tip of Africa. Not only were the people inhabiting this area calling themselves the Kafres, the heathen, but also when the foreign nations came by boat, right? They would come mostly down the Indian Ocean from the right side or the east side using the winds. That's how people would come from Arabia, India, the Far East, and they would come to Africa that way. So this was the area that the foreigners, the non-believers, the people who did not believe in the God of Israel or Isolele, this was their Galilee of the nations, Galilee of the people who were the heathen or considered the heathen because they believed in other gods. When they left typically using this trade winds, which would propel them this way up to America and to Europe on the Atlantic. That's why it's very rough. That's why it's very rough over here on the Atlantic, because the winds are coming down this way. But again, where are they going? They're going to the nations. The nations. And the nations are the ones who are being called the heathens. And this place was called Galilee of the nations because it's a circuit and that's where the nations gather. In fact, this was a replenishing point for the ships as they came down. That's why they called it the Cape of Good Hope, because there was no other place with such a nice, lovely bay to come and get your supplies. Anyway, I'll finish up with this image. This is an image of the mountains of the 12 apostles with Lion's Head in the far background there. And here is the rough so-called Atlantic Ocean, which I believe is part of what was previously called the Sea of Galilee. That brings me to an end. Let's get into some discussion. Thank you for joining. Thank you for listening. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share if you find this content helpful.